Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, thank you for joining me. I'm Katie, and in today's video I've decided, if I can get my words right, to participate in the Dena Tollefson underwater challenge. So make sure you check out her channel. If you haven't got a clue what I'm on about, I will leave links all in the description for you to check out. And if you're new here and you haven't subscribed, why not click that subscribe button and check out the rest of the channel for all the other bits. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about what's in front of you right now. So I'd already penciled out my design and I'd used a paper-based hot press watercolour paper to draw this on. Now the reason I did that was it's a little bit kinder to the liner pens, and it just means I can go in there with all that tiny little bits of detail, as you can see on screen now, that it is circles galore. So I've used different pen nib sizes to emphasise details more on some areas and be a little bit subtle on others. And I've used the thicker liners obviously for the main outline and more the silhouette, you could say, and then gone to town with the detail on the smaller ones. For the seaweed, which is kind of acting like a border here, I decided to go for more of a pointillist, is that the right word? Effect, just to subtly suggest the shape and form. And for the shells, the clamshell at the bottom, I went with a sort of, well, I suppose I went and did lines to represent the ridges, but they were all broken lines because I didn't want it to be too harsh. And for the conch shell, again, I used broken lines. I also went over the areas more than once just to add a bit of depth, but again, not too much, because I've done this on watercolour paper because I want to use watercolours. For the fins and the hairline on the mermaid, I used a really fine pen just to suggest, but again, that's something I want to do more with watercolours. Now for the background, I did want something there, but I didn't want it to overwhelm the foreground too much because that's the main feature. So I thought I would work more with an exclusion approach and masked those areas off with a pen. I kept them quite linear, quite simplified forms with the jellyfish, and I thought a nice circle behind the mermaid could represent a bubble, as well as adding additional bubbles there. So now all that line work's out of the way with, and I did make it look really quick because obviously I speed up and do speed paintings and drawings, but it really did take a long time. But now for the fun part for me. I absolutely love when I've got to a stage where I can start throwing some colour on a page. I love drawing out ideas, and I do actually quite enjoy ink work, but after you've done a gazillion circles and a gazillion dots, you kind of get to a stage where you're ready for something else, in my opinion. So I've used a wet on wet technique, and at the moment I can tell you what paints I'd used. I'd used some Daniel Smith watercolours in Cascade Green because I really wanted those turquoise tones to come through, and then blue tones, as well as a hint of Lunar Blue, and I can't remember the purpley one, but I think that was another. I think it might have been Shadow Violet, I could be wrong, but I just wanted to use those colours because I know how nicely they split, and as you're aware at the moment, I love chucking salt onto watercolours because I love the texture, and as you can see at the moment on screen, the paint and everything's still wet, but you can actually see where the salt is drawing the pigments to those areas as it dries, and I absolutely love that, and I absolutely adore the texture that you get with this. I think it's so appropriate for underwater actually, and hopefully it doesn't always go to plan, but hopefully when I do it, I know it's going to split them pigments up and create some really nice crazy effects. Now my technical tool to remove the salt is using a set square. I don't really know what else to use, to be honest. It's either the set square or the ruler. I try to make sure it's plastic and a clear plastic item. I'm sure there's something more professional to use, but it's whatever I've got at hand. And I use a clear one because I've found before I have a pigmented set square and it has left marks, or the plastic's perhaps been a little bit too harsh. So that's the tool of choice. And I work in small areas when I remove the salt. I've done it in one big sweep, and I kind of find it can damage the paper, and I also find I don't quite get all the salt off. So I find working in smaller areas is really good. You sort of up to speed with where you've removed the salt, and you don't leave too much residue behind. Not that I'm going to be going over the areas again, but I do tend to find working next to the areas I've painted with the salt technique, it doesn't matter how much salt you can get off, sometimes it will reactivate it. So try and get off as much as you can as possible. And I've said this before in a previous video, if you are using this technique in a sketchbook and you use both sides of the paper, make sure that you put a piece of paper in between your sheets if you're going on the other side, because sometimes it can reactivate the salt on the previous page and it can transfer over. So that's my little handy tip for today. Now it's time to start painting the foreground. I've obviously removed the masking fluid on the background, and you can see I've got a really gorgeous subtle outline, and that's exactly what I wanted. It went to plan, yay! Now for the foreground, with it being a paper-based watercolour paper, that's a mouthful, I just wanted to make sure that the layers I were building were quite subtle, and if I needed to put a darker pigment down, I could do it confidently without having to backtrack and try and lift the colour up, because I found that paper-based watercolour paper can be, well, pulp-based I should be saying, can only take so much, whereas I do believe the cotton can take a bit more art punishment, so to speak. Now I didn't want to just use a straight up green, because I think it would have looked a little bit too artificial. So I actually added some yellow tones into that, and ever so slightly introduced an orange tone just so it would complement that background, but not overly. I also don't want to apply too many layers down, because I don't actually want to lose all that detail I've spent all that time adding in there. I still want those tiny little dots to be on show. Now for the mermaid herself, I went for quite nice rich golden orange tones again to complement the background really. I layered the colours up, obviously starting from lighter to darker, and I lay down quite a nice vibrant yellow and then worked above. I used brown tones. This is where the specific colours get a little bit hazy. They are from my White Nights palette, but unfortunately and quite recently I dropped the whole palette on the floor and the pans went everywhere, and because I hadn't written on the back of the pans what colours were allocated to the pans, I can only guess. So I do apologise there, I can't really offer you any colour information there. I had done swatches, but I hadn't really marked them up and matched them to the pans. That was really clever of me, wasn't it? Anyway, let's put that aside, shall we? So to add some depth to the mermaid, I thought using a really rich brown for the edges, just to give that depth, I guess, would be perfect, and use warmer, redder tones, drawing in to where I kept the areas light and didn't add any additional pigments. And I'm really happy with it. She really does look like she's got quite a nice fishy body. What a strange thing to say. And again, using similar colours for the fins and working wet on wet, just a push darker pigments further up the ridges, but not all the way, so it looks a little bit more organic. I really love that pop of red just where the fins meet, well, the body. I was going to say fin socket, what a strange thing to come out, but that area, I really like that. I don't know why, it just seemed the right thing to do. And for the outline of the fins, again, I just added a very fine line of that red, just so it would complement, well, it'd work out to look more orange on the paper, and again, it would complement that background and really stand out and pop. For the shells and more for the foreground, I know I'm painting the grass on, well, the seaweed on screen, but again, I just wanted to use similar colours to what the mermaid were, so that your eye is naturally drawn to follow the direction she's going in. I really did think this piece out, actually. I do put some thought into my work, obviously, but I really put a lot of thought into this. I just thought, for a change, I'm really going to add a lot of detail to this, and it's quite similar to how I used to work quite a while ago, and it's something I actually do want to revisit. Again though, layering up similar colours to the mermaid, but perhaps just keeping it a little bit muted because the mermaid is the star of the show. I just wanted to add a few flashes of the same red I used on her body, just to the shell, and add those details down. And whilst that was drying, it was time to paint the hair, and I love drawing and painting hair. I just added in a wash of colour and built up the layers using richer tones until eventually I start introducing those reds and oranges in there. I didn't actually want it to have a different hair colour to body, not drastically anyway, and I'm really happy with how that turned out. And once all the layers are put down, you can really, in my opinion anyway, I really get a flow of movement, almost like waves or the movement of water, and that's just what I wanted. And I love all these tangled tendrils of hair that are coming away just as she's sort of sinking to the depths. So I was really happy when the Dena Tollefson challenge was underwater. I'd looked at a lot of videos for the Red Rover challenge, and it was a little bit too late for me to participate, but I really enjoyed looking at everyone's work. And my friend Artemystik, she suggested I give it a try. So when Dena announced that this challenge's theme was underwater, I'm sure if you are a subscriber, you've seen there's quite a lot of underwater themes. I do quite like drawing mermaids. So naturally I jumped at this challenge because it's mermaids and they're all underwater. Well, some of them aren't, but most of them are. And yeah, I was like, right, I'm on this. And I think that's probably why I threw quite a lot of different techniques, and I really took my time with this. And yeah, so I just want to say thank you to Dena for setting this challenge and just bringing this little art community together. I'm quite new at YouTube and doing this. I'm not new to art, but I'm new to YouTube, and when I first set out it seemed like such a scary platform, but as I've put videos out and I've spoken to people who very kindly comment, I really do enjoy the art community on here. I love interacting with people. It's just so sweet that challenges are put out there for us. I don't know why I'm getting really soppy about this actually, but yes, maybe it's because it's the underwater theme, but it's really nice when these challenges are out there because that gives me an excuse to sort of check out artists I haven't seen before, and that's really cool, and I really respect and appreciate that. So again, thank you Dena, that's awesome. Anyway, let's get back to the painting. So I'm sure you've seen that I've filled in some areas using similar colours to the mermaid for the shells in the foreground. I'm just building them layers up on the seaweed. For the mermaid's skin tone, I used what colour was it now? I believe it might have been a heavily diluted Naples yellow, which I got in the last scroller box, and I really did have to dilute it. It was quite opaque actually, which I didn't take into consideration, but because it was on an area without any drawn details, I think I got away with it. Now, while that starfish in the foreground is drying and I did throw some salt on it, I decided to go around the external outlines on everything. Again, just to make it pop that little bit more. I'd sort of got a bit of an Art Nouveau vibe for this, so it just seemed right to give a thicker outline to everything. It's almost a little bit like a stained glass effect actually, I've sort of observed with Art Nouveau stuff. Let me know in the comments if you kind of agree there. Anyway, we're all done, from line work to watercolour painting. I just want to say thank you so much for watching, especially if you've made it this far. It is quite a long one. If you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. If you're new here, why not subscribe and check out my other videos, and I'll see you on the next one. See you soon, guys. Bye.